cost of training for life or competition.
That was enthusiastic. So anybody that listens to this on an audio only medium, John always does the finger splicing trick. Like, if you know, I hate this term,
If you
but
know, you
if you know,
know.
you know. Anyway, he always does it every time for like cut and then action. Today he did that so hard that little thud that you might have heard was him performing the trick. Okay, choosing imbalance. One of the things that we didn't discuss when we were preparing for this episode, but I think should be discussed. You have people who are just starting out in fitness, people who are long-term gym goers or, fitness practitioners or make their livelihood off of it. And then you have like these elite level athletes. And as much as people from each of those groups might encourage otherwise, there is either a tendency to look at the other groups with some kind of disdain, or if you don't, a tendency for you to think of someone belonging to those other two groups as looking down at you. If you fit into one of the other categories. Some people don't view things that way at all. They just put their headphones on and the rest of the world disappears, and that's great. But think about when you see some really ripped, jacked person walk by you and overall feeling that you have with regard to that. You know what I mean? Yeah. and that may be a positive feeling, but the way that you judge that person or the way that you might judge yourself is what I'm talking about. That's a part of the psychology of the whole thing. The thing that we're here to talk about today is the choices that go along with that. Now, I've always had this rule in my family. If there is something about someone that they can't change in under 2 minutes, they are aware of it and you don't need to point it out. Right? Like at all.
Are you talking about like my little herpes here that this busted zit on the side of my lip? Yeah.
No, I mean like anything, like anything at all.
Absolutely.
When someone's like, "Oh my God, your eye is crooked." Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. I had no idea that existed every single second of my entire life.
Right,
or every time I look in the mirror, I see that one of my eyes is different than everyone else that I behold.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a movie one time where this woman walked up to another woman who had adaptive mobility needs, and the woman who was walked up to the mobility adapted woman and said, "Oh, look, you're in a wheelchair." In the movie, and the woman in the wheelchair goes, "Yes, I am."
Oh, you have eyes.
Yeah, like, oh, what? Like I didn't know that.
Well, it reminds me to some degree is when somebody has like a punable name, if you will, right? Like anytime they meet somebody new or something, it's always the same kind of joke or tease or things of that nature, and it's like, I have not heard that joke before. Wow, you are just pinnacle of human intelligence and wit.
Right. The thing that I'm saying is that we have specific choices that we make, and usually when we make the choices, if it's something that we can't change or we have a choice that takes a long time to manifest, like you are working out really hard, you're taking a bunch of dietary parameters and exercise parameters and fitness parameters into consideration for how you're going to look or what you're going to perform or what you're going to do. There are specific devotions to those things. And the results are slow to attain. And no matter how quickly they are slow to attain, no one has the super soldier serum. You don't go to bed looking like Captain America before the change, and then wake up looking like Captain America after the change.
And even for those who are thinking like testosterone replacement or even like
Tren or something
or some sort of stacks, like you still have to work out. Like the muscle isn't just going to just naturally appear after you pull the needle out. Like you still have to go train the muscle. You still have to diet semi intelligently, right? Like if if you're starving yourself and you're working out and you're on a stack, you're really not going to have gains that are going to be lasting of any sort.
Yeah, there's no pill of
Right.
any, in any form that is going to turn you into this like beast. It requires the work. Chances are, when a person commits to that kind of life, just like when a person commits to the kind of life that has undesirable results, like if you or someone that you know or anyone that you've ever met has slowly and methodically gained a lot of unwanted weight over a period of time, that person, just like the person who is really profoundly built or fit, is aware in terms of what they are able to not do or perform, right? So someone who's big and bulky is quite naturally going to be a little more flexibility challenged. Someone who is really deconditioned is going to have a little more trouble climbing up and down some stairs. It's everyone is aware of the impact to some degree of what they are doing. And when you look at someone who is deconditioned or super conditioned, and there is this idea that they are unaware of what the costs are for those things, that's not terribly accurate. Chances are that person is well aware.
Yeah, you reminded me when I was a trainer working at the gym, one of the bosses was telling us is no one really needs the advice. They already know the advice. They already know what they should be doing, right? They're just needing some companionship, so to speak, along their way to help keep them at. Maybe it's accountability or make sure they're using the right strategies. But most people know to eat less fast food, right? To drink less sugary beverages or less alcoholic beverages. We know what our vices are that we, push to the extremes, that we could do less, whether it be sitting less or even those people that are extreme, right? They do every high intensity interval class they could do. And they do every, the boot camps and all the group classes that they can kind of jam into the week and just go 100 miles an hour during that class. Like even that individual, right? They need to also adjust themselves and balance themselves out a little bit.
Right. So let's take that from a non-fitness standpoint for just a moment. The person who spends a whole lot of time working, regardless of what the job is, right? Regardless, a whole lot of time working or going to school or isolating themselves. The overwhelming likelihood is that the ramifications of those devotions are understood by the person performing them. You spend a lot of time working, you have less time for the people in your life that are not at work.
It's kind of a silly thought, but like the Einstein, who was such a brilliant mathematician and physicist, but evidently had terrible people skills, right?
And a shit husband. Yeah.
Well, probably that too. I haven't.
Oh no, absolutely.
Details, but I can believe it, right? I always take it back to the idea of a sound equalizer or sound leveling. If you like heavy bass, that's great. But that means you're going to be sacrificing a lot of the other sounds in the song or in the music that you're listening to for that preferred noise or that preferred sound. If you want more of an equalized one, well, then you may not get that same rumble and that same feeling that you're looking for from the sound vibrations and whatnot. But you'll hear more of an evenness to the music. You'll hear more of the high notes and the low notes versus just one half of the equation, so to speak.
What's that?
And you won't bust your rear window.
Well, so the thing that we are pointing to with all of this stuff that we've been talking about is the choices that we make. And understanding that on the tail end of those choices are the ramifications of those things. Let's see, moving forward and applying that to fitness. If all you have time for is some steady state cardio, whatever number of times a week, some loaded lifting, whatever number of times a week, and your life is what happens outside of those things. You're moderately focused on diet. You don't have time to devote to meal prep on Sunday nights for every day out of the week, or going to max loaded lifts however many times a week, and then steady state cardio this many times a week, and then making sure that you get this much sleep because after all, sleep cycles, and then taking your supplements and all that. If you don't have time for any of that, and so that results in whatever number of cardio sessions you get and whatever number of loaded lifting sessions you get or movement sessions you get, you are not going to be someone who is eligible for like a physique competition.
Right.
It just won't happen.
I mean, it's not that you couldn't put yourself into it and you couldn't pay your money to be in it, but the odds and the likelihood of you being able to compete realistically, right, is going to be pretty slim unless you're just some sort of genetic freak. But
well, yeah, I mean, sure, outliers aside, but
you're right. The way I kind of think of it is it's like a circuit breaker, right? Like there's only so much amperage that can go through the circuit at one time, and if we overload the circuit, it's gonna trip, and we're either gonna crash, something's gonna get ejected, and we're gonna have to kind of pick up the pieces and reset the breaker and figure out what tripped it, right? I'm here in Houston. We just had another big power outage, right? And the whole thing, if people have their backup generators, and people don't realize how much power their AC draws, and then they try to microwave a bag of popcorn or something, and then just everything dies.
Yeah.
Right. And then what the hell was So, but taking it back into again the exercise things of it, right? Is again, if to Paul's point is if you already have so many things plugged into your circuits, you only have so much amperage available to be able to expend the energy to be able to devote the time and efforts to those things, or else again your circuit's going to break, you're going to trip, so to speak, and you're not going to be able to do everything. And in fact, you'll probably cause some type of damage potentially to yourself if you keep trying to flip the switch without making some sort of change.
Yeah, and if you apply that to human life, eventually everything just breaks down. You're trying to perform 10 things when all you can optimally perform is 7 things or 6 things, and so all 10 of those things suffer.
Well, you know what happens when you try to put 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag?
What happens when you do that, John?
You're gonna get shit everywhere, right? Like
that was obvious. I thought there was going to be a little more oomph in a punchline, but that's true.
Nope, you're just gonna make a mess.
So the cost of training for competition, or the cost of training for a specific type of visual aesthetic, or the cost of prioritizing, and when I say prioritizing, I don't mean in some judgy way of if you're serious about your health. I mean prioritizing your health because you have to for whatever reason. There are some people that can drink 1,000 cups. Not really. Don't do this. This is not genuine advice. There are some people who can drink 1,000 cups of coffee a day and they sleep just fine. But that's not most people. Right? There are some people that can train and shape their physique and enter into a competition at an elite level. But not everyone can do that.
Even to take that metaphor or analogy or whatever it is further, I don't know if you said like or as in there, but
it's all right. Go ahead.
The humor. The person who can drink 1,000 cups of coffee and not be affected by it, they didn't just wake up one day and had that tolerance, right? They may have been predispositioned to have a high caffeine tolerance, but like maybe the first time they had coffee, they had 1 cup of coffee and it didn't bother them, right? Whereas some people have half a cup of coffee and they're already just shaking and jittering and can't put a sentence together. All that to be said is it is an accumulation effort, I think, is what the point we're trying to drive home here, right? Even the person who can drink 1,000 cups of coffee eventually, like again, if day one they drank that much coffee, they would not have been well.
No, you're right. So the thing here to remember is that there are, like you excellently pointed to earlier, the leveling instruments on an equalizer. Now that's all done or mostly done via software, right, for the average person. So you click and you level these things out. And there are fewer buttons. Do you want it classical? Do you want it jazz? But nonetheless, there are choices that you make, and it brings things forward or makes things recede depending on what your desired sound is.
Yep.
Well, more accurately stated, perhaps, would be whatever the sound is that you can tolerate the most.
Yeah.
So when you are making a choice with regard to your fitness or athleticism or health or athleticism, those things come to the forefront as well. Whatever you want to accomplish may not be in line with whatever you can accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And there are costs to each of those things. Right. Well, let me set this up. First of all, program is one of those terms that's thrown around to separate something that is streamlined versus something that is not. Unfortunately, there's this kind of elitism that goes along with saying something like that. You know, when somebody says, "Go ahead and install that," and you're like, "The battery? Yeah, install the battery." And you're like, "Do you mean you just want me to take the other one out and put it in?" Yeah, does that really count as an installation? That's kind of the same thing with regard to, or it can be the same thing with regard to program. Well, what kind of program are you on? And you may not realize that the split that you're doing whenever you're working out, or the days that you're working in conjunction with the other days that you're working, are in fact a program, but that's what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of program that you choose has a lot to do with how your body recuperates. And then by a large margin, your diet, right? So, so if you could talk a little bit about the programs that, you know, if we're talking about someone who is just an adult gym goer, I'm talking about someone who has the choices that they make in their lives leave a minimal amount of time for minding a diet or minding a you know, a present that's at the gym, versus someone who is that kind of athletic driven, performance motivated individual versus someone who is maybe into an optimum looking aesthetic or competition for some kind of event or circumstance. John, you had talked before about the challenges of a program. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
But programs, as with anything else, you know, it's any change that we're trying to create, right? We need a plan to get there. And so that's really, like you're alluding to earlier, is what a program is. And so again, there's a lot of variables within programming that we can tinker with and change, and you know, all the little nuances. And I think that's a little bit kind of what you're describing too, is there's this dogmatic sense to it to some degree, or this elitism to it, because there are these like small nuances that can be changed to kind of optimize or alter what we're working on. But in a kind of a macro sense or a big sense, right? If we had these kind of three groupings of people, you know, for, you know, the way I look at it is the general population, if you will, or the, as you said, the just group, the health and fitness focus more so, as I would kind of or the health and wellness conscientious as the forefront. Honestly, you know, they just need to get in and move as often as they can and when they can. Ideally, right, using proper technique and form as best they can and know how, and you know, gaining knowledge to build those techniques up better. People that are going to be probably a little bit more competition focused, depending on what their competition is. Let's say if it's more of a lifting competition or a weightlifting competition, their program is going to need to be geared towards their event. And those events are not about necessarily how pretty you do it, but getting the most up successfully, right? And in those regards, right, that is going to become the focus. That becomes the goal. So whereas the health and fitness individual just wants to keep their joints moving, be able to pick up, you know, the kid off the ground, or pick their groceries up off the floor, or get on the ground and maybe pick something up off underneath the car, right? We just need to make sure we're moving the joints and getting the body not stuck into any one position, as it were. Again, taking it back to a competitor, they need to work on that skill and that development of the lift that they're trying to compete in. So therefore, they're going to really, like taking it back to the sound equalizing, they're going to really push all the dials to leverage getting better at that one particular lift. If we take it more into a nuanceable sense, right, they're going to be training just that lift, meaning they'll do things supporting it. They'll keep pushing the weights as much as they can, despite technique a lot of times, to be able to, again, lock it out or finish out the lift. And that has its own detriments, and as we'll discuss in maybe later here today, and definitely in other videos.